Hi, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Desi Forty, and I am the Youth Program Manager at Easterseals, Massachusetts. My image description is I am a white woman with dirty blonde shoulder length hair. I am wearing a black, purple, and white vertically striped sleeveless blouse. Behind me is a white wall with a sign that reads, I think it is important to hashtag teach disability history because it will increase disability awareness and decrease discrimination. This event is being live captioned, and if you would like to access that, you can do so by clicking on the closed caption button. We would like to start with a short video about the Easter Seals Teach Disability History campaign. At Easterseals, Massachusetts, we've been working on a campaign to hashtag Teach Disability History. To tell you more about this, here are some of the young adults working on this campaign.
Hi, my name is Nathan.
Hi, my name is Austin.
My name is Anita Griffin.
My name is Stephanie.
My name is Elizabeth Gray.
My name is Matthew Jameson, and I am a young adult with a disability working with Easterseals, Massachusetts on a campaign to hashtag Teach Disability History.
The goal of this campaign is to spread awareness about the importance of teaching disability history in schools.
Please join us in these efforts by educating schools about the curriculum. You can play your part by also using the hashtag on social media to share why you think it is important to hashtag Teach Disability History.
I think it's important to teach disability history because it will promote understanding, awareness, and acceptance.
I think it's important to teach disability history because it's good for the schools to educate students and faculty so that they are aware of some of the obstacles that people with disabilities have to face.
I think it's important to teach disability history because it helps students and teachers in the classroom know that people with disabilities can overcome many different challenges, and that if you have a disability, it's okay, and there's people that you can still succeed in life.
I think it is important to teach disability history because as a society, it is our utmost duty to educate people with and without disabilities, to understand how the disability movement got started, how far we have come, and how much more there is to do.
I think it's important to teach disability history so we'll have a more inclusive society.
I think it's important to teach disability history because knowledge is power.
Throughout the event, we will be sharing web links as well as bios on each of the panelists in the chat. These will also be shared via email with all who have registered for the event. And they can also be later found on our website, www.disabilityhistory.eastersealsma.org. With so many great panelists, we have broken the event into two sections with 3 panelists in each. The first section will focus on the importance of teaching disability history in school, and the second will be around how teaching disability history would help shape identity. All of the questions that will be asked have been predetermined, but if you have additional questions, you are welcome to ask using the Q&A option. These questions will be shared with the panelists after the event, and their responses will be posted on our website as well as Facebook using the hashtag #TeachDisabilityHistory at a later date. I would now like to introduce Charlie Carr, who is an authentic disability rights pioneer who has been active in the independent living and disability rights community for over 40 years. He is someone I look up to, and I'm so grateful he is able to help lead the discussion today. Charlie?
Thanks, Desi. First of all, I want to thank Easterseals Youth Program and all of the young adults that are involved and engaged in teaching disability history. And I really like this group a lot because there's no better example of peer support and looking at strategies to gain independence and eventually get involved in the mainstream of society. And the people that are on this panel are the leaders that we are cultivating, and will be the people that will carry on, really, the work that people like myself and Desi and others have done over the many decades leading up to the ADA and then up until now. I'd like to put this webinar in a context. Teaching disability history is critical to all of us, anyone who's listening, whether you work in an independent living center, whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent, whatever you are, teaching the history of the disability rights movement and independent living in general is critical. Why? Think about it. As you were coming through school and as you were growing up, how many times have you seen of Martin Luther King and the footage of John Lewis crossing the Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday in 1965? There's history. There's history behind the African American movement to break through Jim Crow South and become meaningful and involved in society, get jobs. That's what that march was about, was employment. We need to learn history. For those of you that are familiar with the Stonewall riots in New York in '69, you'll know that in this case, primarily gay men were going to a nightclub and constantly being harassed by New York City police until one night in 1969, the men in that club stood up and it resulted in a riot, which is the genesis really of the LGBTQ movement that we have today, that by the way is under threat with this current Supreme Court. So we need to talk about our history. You don't hear about the creation of Center for Independent Living in '72 in Berkeley. You don't hear about the 504 sit-ins that started in San Francisco and caught on around the country to get that law passed. You don't hear about all these things that were done that are the foundation for the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Olmstead decision. So that's why teaching disability history is so critical. And we've got to really double down and make sure that every school in the state uses the curriculum that's now part of the master curriculum in schools called, what is the name of the film? I forgot all of a sudden. I'll get it. We'll put it in the chat box. Great Fight for Disability Rights. It's critical, and it's available in curriculum in each and every school. Teachers could choose to teach this in their classrooms. So I just wanted to give an intro about why disability history is so important. And now we can get into our different panels. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And so to introduce our first set of panelists, I want to introduce Walter Lloyd, who is a sophomore at Amherst Regional High School. And for the past year, he has been part of an alliance against ableism at UMass Amherst, which aims to create a greater awareness of people with disabilities. And there will be more information about that group in the chat, as well as Walter's full bio, as well as the full bios of Tory. Tory Dixon is an advocate and peer counselor at Stavros Center for Independent Living, and it has been with Stavros for 26 years. She is also married, mother of 3. And Kevin Cavanaugh, a youth advocate at Stavros Center for Independent Living. He is also a 20-year veteran of the Holyoke Public School System, where he taught history.
Thank you.
So, Charlie, you can take it away.
Thank you, Desi. All right, we're going to jump right into our session, and the first one is the importance of teaching disability history in school. And our panelists that Desi is going to introduce will then address some questions that we have prepared in advance.
Yeah, so we have on the screen Walter, Tory, and Kevin. And again, their full bios are in the chat.
Great, thank you, everyone. So let's get into our questions. The first question for our panel is, what was your school experience? Who wants to jump in and take that one?
Charlie, this is Tory, and I'm a white woman wearing glasses, and the room behind me is light blue, painted light blue. I have dark brown hair. And my school experience, I grew up in Longmeadow and went to public school, and I was mainstreamed. And when Chapter 766 came into being, they created resource rooms, and I was taught there in smaller size classes. And for the most part, I was the only girl in those classes. There were mostly boys with me, and I felt like I wasn't being challenged, and that as time went on, my parents and I really had to advocate for me to be challenged in school and to push forward, and because I was tracked, and I was on the lower tier because I was a person with a disability, a physical disability and a learning disability. So they I believe, made assumptions that I was not going to be able to learn as well as my other peers.
Great, thank you, Tory. Who else would like to take this question on?
I can take it on. I'm a Walter. I am a white male with short brown hair and a headset on. I am wearing glasses and I am wearing a blue shirt. And I am still in high school, and it has always been a fully inclusive and regular classroom for me.
Thank you. That's it?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to take that one on?
Sure. I'm a white male with grayish brown hair, a little heavier than I want to be at this point, and I'm wearing a blue collared shirt. And similar to Tory's experience, I was always mainstreamed as a child and as a teen. I received resource services as well, occupational therapy, physical therapy at times during school as all part of my IEP. But I was in regular education classes, and I felt that I was always because I was the only student that I can ever recall with a physical disability in my classes, and that singled me out. But it wasn't anything that made me feel uncomfortable or different. I was always accepted by my peers and my teachers, and I really, got as much as I could out of school. And as I said, I was, successful enough to not want to leave, and I went back and got my teaching degree, and I taught for 20 years in the Holyoke school system.
Thank you, Kevin. I think this is a nice segue into our next question. And the question is for all of you, do you think people with disabilities would be truly if disability history was taught in school? When
wants to, I guess I'll
to jump in.
Okay. I honestly think yes. More education that kids have and people have in general about disabilities, less of a stigma, or the less of a there is, there's less of a stigma about someone with a disability. And it's important for people to be educated about all members of society and all of the things that people have to bring to this world. And we're all different, and we all have positive things that we can accomplish, and things that we can do, and things that we can become successful at and be productive members of society. And I think that that's important, and I think that it's valuable to start teaching disability history or about disabilities as early as maybe kindergarten or first grade, and then gradually moving things up the older kids get and the more understanding they have of disabilities, because I think that that's important to, we've got to start while people are young and while kids are young, and just make sure that that gets out there for everybody to understand and grasp.
Thank you. Who else wants to take this?
I will. This is Tory again. I think it's very important that disability history be taught in the schools, and as Kevin said, as young as possible. And because I remember that I did not learn about disability history per se until I was actually in grad school, and that's a shame. I should have learned about it much earlier than that. One thing that I believe, if kids are taught in school about disability history, they'll realize that people with disabilities are not any different than they are. We are the same. We want the same things other people do. It's just so important to teach this. I'm passionate about it, and I hope that the school systems in Massachusetts and throughout the country will pick this up.
Yeah.
The other thing, just one more thing, Walter. The other thing is, when I was younger, and in public school, I had the feeling that kids were either afraid of me because I was different or felt very uncomfortable around me. And I think that if we had disability history being taught in my public school, my experience would have been different.
Thank you, Tory. Walter, you wanted to jump in, right?
Yeah, I can definitely second what Tory was saying. Just like, and Kevin, just like incorporating disability history all throughout K-12 schooling. And I think that it will become much more normal for non-disabled kids to be around someone with a disability. And it will just make everyone feel more included and yeah.
Thank you. So there's themes in this particular question, I think, that are important, and it feels like stigma is a reoccurring theme. Seeing students with disabilities as very different and treating us as different is important. But the thing that strikes me is that we've had IDEA in place and its predecessor in place since the 70s, where kids with disabilities were required by law to be integrated into school systems, but yet we're still experiencing these symptoms. And so it says that, to me, it says we need to show what our history is. We are where we are. So I just wanted to, I shouldn't be jumping in as a moderator, and I apologize for that, but it just struck me when you folks were talking. All right, we're going to wind up with our last question is, so we've got the Great Fight for Disability Rights, which is a wonderful video that as a result of a strong advocacy campaign that involved Easterseals, is now in the Commonwealth's master school curriculum, so that any teacher can show this video to a classroom of people and educate them about teaching disability history. But yet, we've probably got a handful of schools that are doing it. So my question to you is, what do you think is stopping disability history from schools?
I can take the one on. I think as a high school student now, I think one of the big things is that there is so much to fit within the current curriculum that they just don't think that that they have time for it, but they now don't really have an excuse because it's in the it's in the Massachusetts framework.
Thanks. Anyone else have any thoughts on what it is that's stopping disability from being taught in schools? Disability history.
Sorry, do you want to go?
Go right ahead.
This is Tory again, and I really think it comes down to the fact that teachers have so many time restraints put on them, and they have to unfortunately teach the kids the MCAS, the standard testing that the kids have to take before they can graduate. It's not a great excuse, but they have to start incorporating this. It's now written in, and I'm glad it is. And I hope that it takes off sooner rather than later, and teachers start teaching this curriculum.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tory.
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Charlie. I think as a history teacher for 20 years, I can say that there is so much that needs to be covered. Just to reiterate what both Walter and Tory were saying, there's a lot of information that needs to be covered. I can remember teaching, I taught high school for 12 of those 20 years that I taught, and I can remember teaching all the way from pre-Revolutionary War all the way to World War II and beyond. So imagine trying to squeeze that in a year. It's a lot. But that being said, now that disability history is part of the curriculum, there is no excuse, and it can be taught. It can be in as part of the curriculum. It's all part of the civil rights era, and that's where you can start. You can put that in the civil rights era when you're talking about Martin Luther King, and you're talking about women's rights, and you're talking about all these different things. You certainly can carve out some time and some space to disability history on the map. And I think that that's important for kids to understand, and everybody to understand that's it's a valuable part of our history. I mean, Alexander Graham Bell's wife was deaf. Who knows that? I mean, why did he invent the telephone? That's why. That's what drove him to invent the telephone. So these are things that people can do to, you can keep that stuff in there, and you can sprinkle it in, or you can spend, time on it and really get into it. And I think that that's important, especially today.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, we've used up all of our questions, and we've covered quite a bit of territory. I'm going to turn it over now to Desi, who is going to discuss the next topic, and then introduce the panelists. So, Desi.
Hey, that was great. Thank you to Walter and Kevin and Tori for your insight on that. That I really enjoyed that. And so now our next topic will be focused around how teaching disability history would help shape identity. And again, the full bios will be found in the chat and will be emailed after the event. But to give a brief introduction, Jennifer Lee-Rambharose has a master's degree in disability studies from the University of New York and holds a bachelor's degree in health science, society, and policy and American studies from Brandeis University. She has remained committed to advocating for equal opportunities and full inclusion of persons with disabilities. Today, she serves as coordinator of independent living services at Stavros. Dominic Mondon-Poirier graduated from Fitchburg State University in 2016 with a bachelor's in history and is currently employed by both Stavros Center for Independent Living and Easterseals, Massachusetts, where he works as an advocate for people with disabilities. Cody Rooney is a student at Holyoke Community College from Amherst, Massachusetts. He is an up and coming leader in the community. Cody is also an active member of the group helping to lead the charge at Easterseals, Massachusetts on the Teach Disability History campaign. So, welcome to Jen, Cody, and Dominic.
Okay, thank you, Desi. We're going to jump right into our questions. For this panel and for the one before it, we chose to open with the same question. And that is, what was your school experience like?
So yeah, so I can start. So I'm Dominic. So I'm a black and white male, and I have this Celtics poster behind me. I also have black curly hair. And my school experience. So my experience was interesting because when I started kindergarten, I wasn't disabled yet, so I was still able to walk. So I became paralyzed, as my bio was saying, as a result of my chemotherapy treatments from childhood leukemia. So when I became paralyzed, it was actually around this time in 1999. So at the beginning of the school year, right? So I was at a school where, it's not wheelchair accessible because the school was built in the 19th century. So, when I recovered, I actually had to transfer schools. And, because I missed a lot of school in the beginning, like my teachers wanted to hold me back in kindergarten, and my aunt was a really big advocate for me, and essentially like homeschooled me, to get me caught up and make sure that the school wasn't tracking me into lower classes in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. So for most of my schooling, I was actually in mainstream classes, all the way up through high school and into college as well.
Great, thanks, Dominic. Who else wants to jump in?
I was in special ed really all 12 years of school, but the most notable, I guess, experiences 9th and 10th grade, I have behavior issues, so my two choices was to go to a behavior school, which I can only imagine what that be like. But I chose to go to English high, and that my 9th and 10th grade year was difficult because I was in this classroom with or disability. So I kind of felt segregated, had some issues self-advocating, and that was that. But then on to 11 and 12, they discontinued that program. So I was more mainstream, still in small classes, but it was way better. And then I passed and cast, I graduated, and now I'm currently at Holyoke Community College, my 4th year, but overall, my school experience took a lot of determination and perseverance to overcome the constant challenges. But really thankful to be where I'm at today. And yeah.
Thank you, Cody. Just sort of as a personal note, my experience was just the opposite. I was in public schools in integrated classrooms because I had not had my disability until the 9th grade. And then when I did and was able to go to school, I wound up in the Mass Hospital School, which is, of course, a segregated school. So you and I have different experiences, but we experienced a little bit of each. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right. So the next question for our panel is, if disability history was taught when you were in school, what impact would that have had on yourself and you in general, your self-identity, your esteem? What would the benefits have been?
It would have shown me that, that I'm not alone, because oftentimes I really was alone as far as like having a disability in a mainstream class. Like I was, I went to school for history, so I was always kind of like a history geek. But a lot of what I know about disability history was I either figured it out on my own, or I learned about it through here at Easterseals or at Stavros or other disability community events. So yeah, just not being alone, and having people be more aware of it.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. That's helpful. How about Jen? Do you have anything you want to say, Jen, about your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I'm Jennifer. I am a Black woman. I have 2 twists in my hair leading into an Afro puff. I have opal-shaped glasses and a black shirt. And the walls behind me are white, and I have brown doors. I think for me, what teaching disability history would have taught me was that persons with disabilities are resilient. And through the disability movement, we've remained resilient. And I think for young people in particular, it's very important for them to learn strength really early. And I personally believe that knowledge is power, and learning about the history and those that came before you and the struggles in which they face gives you the opportunity to be able to learn from them and create positive change moving forward. So I think learning that resiliency really early on would have shaped my disability pride greatly and would have gave me the confidence that I think I was exposed to later on in my life when getting connected to groups like Easterseals and the local independent living center.
Great, thank you, Jen. Let's go to our next question, which kind of dovetails really from this one. And it basically, how would teaching disability history have helped in shaping your identity, and how would it contribute to, you know, your idea of disability pride? How would that have had an impact?
So I will start. I think it would have boosted that self-confidence I had, because 6-7 years ago I would have been terrified of being here tonight because I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel I was a leader or advocate, but if disability pride was taught back when I was in any grade school, I think I would have went into college in the real world more confident, because I had to build up once I got to college. I think that's a huge difference maker that would have been for me.
Thank you, Cody. Who else would like to take this one?
Yeah, so as far as you know, disability being taught in schools, you know, if it was taught in school, you know, it would give me like a real sense of pride, you know, like accomplishment. You know, like kind of like reading about like you know, like the triumphs of like the civil rights movement, and you know, like other movements, you know, throughout our history. You know, and in turn, you know, I would think that, you know, it would make people more aware of disability. You know, it wouldn't be such like a foreign concept to a lot of people.
Thanks, Dominic. I think, just as an editorial comment, I think that movements have developed, including the disability rights movement, over time, despite the fact that we're not being taught disability history, have come together and developed a sense of identity and pride, which is throwing off the shackles of centuries, really, of oppression and being locked up in institutions and literally being tortured in some situations. It gives us a sense that we are people, we have lives, we have feelings, we're smart, we can contribute, and that we're proud of who we are. Again, we are always borrowing from other movements and the Black Pride movement and the Gay Pride movement evolved into major opportunities where these disenfranchised groups could come out and hold our heads high and say, you know, I have a disability and I'm proud of who I am. So I wanted to finally close on this panel and basically ask our panelists, how would teaching disability history help influence areas such as voting rights and civil rights? If you had been taught disability history, would it have made a difference in how you act and talk about civil rights and voting?
Well, I think I would have been more interested as more being a leader. I would say high school if I was taught, you know, my rights, because we all talk about our school as a team advocating for you, but if it's taught in schools, maybe the youth will want to say, you know what, I want to advocate. It's my education about voting rights. That's a really key topic right now. So it's important to educate folks on that, especially now.
I agree completely. Thank you, Cody. Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
This is Jennifer. I think particularly for students of color, it's really important that when talking about the civil rights and voting, that individuals with disabilities also understand that accessibility is a part of that conversation. And often accessibility isn't talked about when these topics are covered in school. And I think being able to expand beyond the way that we currently talk about these topics allow young people with disabilities to be able to see themselves within these movements, and they're able to see that them too, even with a disability, can continue to advocate for progressive change moving forward, because they're able to see examples of how effective organizing has taken place amongst persons with disabilities, specifically those that may look like them or come from similar backgrounds.
Totally agree. I think that we need to be, as a community, as a movement, much more intersectional than we are. And that means working closely with other marginalized groups, understanding how they feel, what their agenda is, where they're going, and learn and participate. Because you're right, right now is key, and I think people of color in general, African Americans in particular, are critical in this upcoming election. And I just want to say that there is a Rutgers survey that was taken, and it demonstrated that the vote was a key factor in the midterm elections that brought in so many Democrats into the House. So I think as a power, when we unite and come together, we can make change. And in this case, voting is so critical. So thank you, Jen. Dominic, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So thanks, Charlie. So as far as civil rights and voting rights, I feel like if people were taught about it, it would encourage them to get involved in the process, because like a lot of people with disabilities are unfortunately like disenfranchised, or not given the tools uh, to vote, as Jen was saying, with accessibility. Um, so yeah, it would get more people involved in the process, I believe, and then it would encourage society to see us as truly belonging.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. And I think too, one of the things that I think about is it's important for people with disabilities to not only vote, which is critical, but to run for office, get on a school board, run for town council, run for governor. If we don't seize control of our lives in the political arena, we're going to be where we are now for quite a long time. And let me just say that where we are now is unacceptable. We have the highest rate of unemployment in the world, and certainly in this country. We are the most marginalized. We're the poorest. So, we have to seize power in order for this to change. And certainly anyone on this panel, these panels, is absolutely qualified to run for the school committee or to get involved at least in the civic arena in your community. So I would just want to encourage people to do that. So that concludes both of our panels. And I want to just say that, first of all, a big thank you to both panel presentations and each panelist for doing a great job. This was a while in the making, and it is just something that we hope will be a springboard for those of you that are listening and watching to think about the strategies and the approaches that we can take to teach disability history, not just in the schoolrooms, but to each other, and talk about our histories and experiences to each other, because it's critical. We'll never know about how we got to where we are today without learning about where we came from. So that's something that I encourage people to do a lot. And finally, I just want to thank Easterseals for all the work that they've been doing around youth programming. And this is just one example of a number of things that Easterseals is doing with young leaders. So thank you to Easterseals. My final comment is November 3rd is around the corner. People, vote. You can still early vote. You can still vote by mail, and you can still vote absentee. And of course, you can still vote in person. We've got to change the direction that this country is in. We have the power. Let's use it in the ballot box. Thank you all very much. You did a great job. And I'm going to turn it over to Desi now.
Thank you, Charlie. And yes, I just want to echo what Charlie said, and to thank all of our great panelists for making this such a successful event. I also want to thank our interpreters and court reporter for your time today. And I also want to thank the young adults that have been really helping to lead the charge on this hashtag Teach Disability History campaign. They were the ones that came up with the idea for this event and really helped helped come up with some of the questions and the shaping of this. So thank you to them. And as a reminder to everyone, please help us keep this campaign and this idea of teaching disability history going, because that's how we get things done. And so please share your thoughts, share why you think it is important to hashtag teach disability history on social media. Tell your friends, tell your teachers, tell your school boards, because I think all of these voices can really make it happen. And yeah, and we've gotten some great questions, and I'm going to share all of those with the panelists after this event, and those will again be posted on social media as well as our website. So again, thank you all, and I hope everyone has a great evening.